Let's get into today's episode of Why We Succeed.
I just think it's about being humble enough to remain coachable. I'll end with something I read recently also as it pertains to this question that kind of bothered me a little bit is somebody, Twitter, which is an interesting opposite of paradise. Somebody was like, man, I wouldn't want a coach who has a coach or whatever the case is. And I thought that was the stupidest. I read a lot of stupid statements on Twitter. I was like, I thought that was the stupidest thing. One of the stupidest things I've ever read because my therapist had a therapist. My coach had a coach. My mentor had a mentor. And I would not want advice from someone who's done growing and developing.
Right.
I wouldn't even want to work with someone who is like, I know all there is to know.
I agree.
And I don't care if that person's an expert, a doctor, like if they're not still pursuing continuing professional education or growth or development, that tells me they're done. Yep. So what can they teach me?
Right. They can only lead you so far.
Right.
Yep. Wow. That's good, man. And when you look at the progression that you've made with your business, what would you say is the thing that got you on track? Because you mentioned you started off and there were the regrets. There were the failures, and I'm sure there were some lessons that you learned along the way, which is what you were just mentioning, that you were imparting on the people that you now mentor. With that in mind, kind of going back to the original question is, oh man, it slipped my mind that quick.
It's my fault because I actually did detract from the question a little bit. And you asked which people helped me with starting the business or how.
Oh, right. I did. Yeah. Yes.
And then that was my fault.
No, that's on me.
I went on a bit of a tangent. And so I have it now because I wrote it down. And the reason I went to that KPI book is so I made that list and I got that at a workshop that I was at for building what was now be my courses that exist. I built like 6 that sucked. and I have 2 that I think are good now. And they're probably suck when I look at them 5 years from now. But so I built like 6 that I thought were good. Mm-hmm. And she was like, yeah, you've got 3 of the 5. She's like, you've got your pitch. I had a bad one at that time. She's like, you've published 3 books. Somewhat had a profile and then I had a podcast and Instagram. She's like, you need product and partnerships. And she mentioned it in passing. It was a nice woman that I met from Jamaica. And she was there to build out. I think she was doing like financial coaching or something like that. Okay. But every now and then I'll just get some advice that kind of just rolls around in my head. And I was like, oh, okay, okay. And sometimes you'll hear something and it's a seed that's being planted. Inception would be, the most poisonous idea that can be. Inception would say the most poisonous idea is the planting of the seed of an idea. And so she planted the seed of an idea. She inceptioned me.
Right.
And it was just kind of in the back of my mind. I was still with the previous business at that time. And then when I launched my own, I went back and read that book. Okay. And I was like, she's right. I have the buckets. And the biggest one that I felt was missing was partnerships. And I think it's a mistake that a lot of, especially non-entrepreneurs, and that if you come from a family that isn't an entrepreneurial family or you never started a business yourself is, in college or really in America, we're taught to be self-sufficient. They create employers. Right. So they don't teach you anything about being an entrepreneur. I got a degree in business. I learned nothing about being an entrepreneur. They teach you how to work for employers.
Thanks.
And I was like, I'm missing partnerships. Mm-hmm. And then I took a step back and I was like, well, we interviewed 150 self-made men and women, in this case, in personal finance. I went back and listened to some of those podcasts, because at the time when you're doing an interview, you're listening to ask questions and plug out things for the audience. I wasn't really listening to learn. Okay. And then I was like, okay, let me start actualizing my partnership. So when I started in 2021, I had 7 revenue streams. I think I've got them written down here. I had, books, courses, podcasts, blog, sponsorship, and affiliates and referrals. Okay. Those were my revenue streams. So, and I had a day job. So I was like, I'm not going to go broke. I might be miserable and I might be, another failed adventure. But I was like, what do I have to lose? Like, I'm making $0 right now. So if I go over here and fail making $0, I've lost nothing. I just made $0. Right. And I just started, my focus for 2021 was I'm going to get as many partnerships as I can. And so now we're I don't know when this will release, but we're recording in November 2021. I have 20 partnerships. So I started with 7 onboarded 13 more partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned along the way is how to expedite those partnerships. So I have a great at 773 Designs. I'll go ahead and plug him. Cody's his name. He builds my website at themarcusgarrett.com. And so and he runs his own business, which is critical. Sometimes we just have quarterly talks where we just kind of talk about business. Right. And again, that's a relationship that was built. I met him through a guest that we had on the show. I went to his, Carter Cofield, as a CPA. So I went to his profile and I was looking at his great website. And I was like, man, this website's awesome, man. Right. And I was like running WordPress at the time, like everybody else. I was using all the free stuff because I'm cheap. And I was like, damn, my website sucks. And I'm over here trying to, this is my competition, man. Go take all my business. I scrolled down to the bottom and it said designed by 773 Designs. And I reached out to Cody and I was like, hey, saw your information on Carter, got to get that validation. And I had interviewed Carter before. He's like, Carter, more like Marcus is cool. Once again, he wasn't like Marcus is a jerk. Don't work with him. Right.
That's important.
Yeah, exactly. So we started, that was 2020. I had 3 logos and 1 dream. That's what I tell people. I had 3 logos and a dream and hope. That's how I started my business, with hope, 3 logos and a dream. Around March, I took a course on building courses. So course from scratch. And I like to plug people from Danielle Lesney. I took course from scratch. And so March, I built my courses. So now I have my products. I have my profile. I already have my 4 things checked off. I'm building my partnerships. And by June, we did 150,000 in affiliate sales.
Wow.
By September, we were named Best New Personal Finance Podcast, The Marcus Garrett Show. And probably by the end of the year, if it's under 50,000, I'd be surprised in annual income. And that's year 1. So So I went from January like, this was a mistake. I failed, and I don't think I made any money in January and February. And then that's another point to highlight. Like, it wasn't all like just revenue. There's months where I've made as much as $10,000 a month on the side, and I've made as little as $800 a month. So anybody that says like, oh, this entrepreneur hustle, like, it is what it is. Like, if you like a steady paycheck, this entrepreneur hustle ain't for you. So the first piece of advice I give people is not to quit your day job. But then I've just really been actualizing partnerships. And what I told people is the best description, ironically, that I think I can give for the Marcus Garrett Show, kind of in my head and how it's evolved, is I see eventually a model like, I used to love listening to Stephen King, or Larry King, excuse me. I should probably get his name right. So Larry King Live, and I think I got it from my father because, people are like Larry King. Some people are like, who the hell is Larry King? But, a famous host, unfortunately passed a year or 2 ago. And he just interviews, he just has interesting interviews. I'm actually not sure what Larry King does. He just has guests on his show and he has a huge platform for doing so. And I was like, it'd be really cool to do something like that. And I was like, how could I do that? And, I had the ingenious idea of, the Marcus Garrett Show. And the tagline is entertaining conversations with your favorite influencers and entrepreneurs. And really, it's an excuse for me to actualize that 40s of teach, pay, mentor, and pay it forward. Is when I see someone doing something cool, I reach out and be like, hey, would you be interested in coming on the show? I tend now to try to target people with a large audience themselves. So I have some metrics that I use, but it's like, it's actualizing that partnership bucket. So I identified what I was missing. I didn't have partnerships. I was already doing interviews. I've been podcasting since I think 2013. It might be 16. So I've been doing it for a long time, but I didn't have any purpose or sense of direction. And so what I tell people is a goal is not enough. For arguably 30 years of my life, I had lots of goals. I had very few systems. Systems are what move you to success. Systems is how you actualize, whether that's money, whether that's, partnerships, whether that's, brand profile, whatever it is. The system is how you get there. So, some going backwards, the people that I would highlight as I partner with my business coach, which is Sylvia Inc. She's on Instagram as well. My lawyer, Maureen, is her first name. I forget what she goes by on Instagram. Carter was very inspirational. I've had him on the show. So Carter Cofield CPA, who's on Instagram. And then as far as the courses and products go, it would be Danielle Leslie and the next one I'm about to name, Terry Igioma, who does Invest with Terry. They're both $1 million course creators who we've had on the show. And like, sometimes I did a mastermind with Danielle, but sometimes, Danielle, sometimes I just identify people that are, I don't have to have immediate contact with them. I don't have to have any actual contact with them, but they're inspirational.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm going to emulate that model because I like, going back to Larry King. I've never met Larry King a day in my life because I like what they're doing. And I think I would like doing that as well. Right. Let me see how I can do that in my small little sphere of influence.
I like that. And going back to the partnership aspect, I'm curious, how do you define partnership? Like, what is it to you? And what is the ultimate purpose of the partnerships that you develop?
Well, in that case, there would be two kinds. There's the simple partnership of like, we're just going to work together. It might be as simple as you're coming on the podcast. Maybe you do mentorship for me, or I do mentorship for you, or we do coaching or things like that. It's quite literally probably the definition of partnership. Two individuals working together, partnering together to, ideally in this scenario, become better.
Right.
In my circumstance, when I'm talking about partners, I'm more monetization typically. So usually a partner falls for the brand, The Marcus Garrett Show. And that was very important as well for The Marcus Garrett LLC, which is, I incorporated in 2021 as well. Like I want this to be a for-profit business. Right. And that was, I define a business, at least a for-profit one, as one that makes money. Right. And so I'm like, okay, I'm not making money. To me, this is a hobby with a tax ID. Yeah. And like, that's cool. But at 39, I don't have a lot of luxury of free hobbies. And if it is, like, I got to pick and choose where my hours are spent because they are limited. I got a full, at least right now, I've got a full-time job. But even if I didn't have a full-time job, I've got a full-time life. And so I've got a fiance now. We're wedding planning, which eventually means we'll be children planning, which eventually means we'll be housing planning, which eventually means we'll be school. And, the list goes on and on.
It goes on and on.
So I guess going back to some lessons for those 20 and 30-year-olds is exercising the free time benefit. They say youth is wasted on the young. Yeah. So, I could have built this whole business in my 20s and I'd just be balling out right now in my 30s and 40s, but I didn't have the know-how and wherewithal. Sponsors are individuals that come on the show. Well, they either come on the show or you can pay me $500. I'll read in your sponsorship. So, happy for the Marcus Garrett Show is sponsored by the Why We Succeed podcast. The Why We Succeed podcast is hosted by J-Man. You're like, I'll read that right in. You want to toss me some money. So that's like some traditional sponsorships. And then I have now exclusive partners. So I have 9,800 or something like that followers on Instagram. But I bring that up because now I'm big enough and I've had enough experience. People are like, okay, I'm not going to like take their money and disappear to Firefest or something like that. Like I'm not going to pull a Ja Rule on them. So like I will legitimately show up because I've showed up for 15 other years. They know where to find me. They got my business address. And so they can track me down. And we affiliate exclusive partnership. So I'm a partner with Thinkific.
Okay.
So if you host or sign with my referral link through Thinkific, you'll get 30 days free. I get a kickback for that. And I disclose all of this. And then I have one with Masterclass. So when you see those ads for like Issa Rae, Chef Ramsay, so like when you see those commercials, like Chef Ramsay's like, have you ever thought about, making a biscuit? It's delicious. Like if you click my link, I get paid for that. And, on down the line for 17 more. And then some of my guests that come on the show, Carter's an example, Terry Ijeoma is an example, Tila Holcomb is an example. And like I said, I try to plug these people because they're out there doing great things. And I tend to focus on persons of color, men and women. And so if you buy one of their courses, either through a podcast that I've hosted with them, then again, that goes back to the partnerships. I kind of believe in the philosophy that a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm not really... And again, I'll check my privilege here. I'm in a position where I don't need the money as much anymore. And that's a fortunate place to be in because you can actually negotiate from a stronger place. Like I turn down sponsors and partnerships now because it's like, now that doesn't really fit with my brand. That's not really looking like well, I can't say liquor because if Maker's Mark reaches out to me, I'd be happy to work with them. But like, let's say MD 2020 or somebody reaches out, I'll be like, nah, dog, I'm good. Like, I don't need that Mad Dog money right now. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not hurt like that, And so it's a good place that I have put myself in, knocking on 40, as my friend, I put in air quotes, pointed out to me. And just by the math, technically 20 years, but it took 10 years to get there. And now I can go back and help others with shortcuts. I can tell them what not to do. I can tell them what doesn't work.
And that's so important. Now, I know you're an avid reader, and I'm curious, are there any other daily habits that you attribute to your success?
I will too. So let me write that down so I don't lose track of the question again.
Okay. That's fair.
This is actually something I learned. And there's another thing I've learned over the years is trying to answer a question while you're formulating the answer to the question and remembering the question. So that's a job interview tip is if they don't give you the questions, write down the question because I actually did this to myself not too long ago. Like trying to remember a question and answering a question, the mind isn't made up for that. So write down the question because you'll find that you'll talk for 20 minutes, come back like, damn, I didn't answer the question. Habits for success, as I refer to my notes here. So yes, I would go to the reading, and that the one you're referring to, I believe, is I read 20 plus personal finance books, which was a challenge on the podcast, and now I read and review them, and that's a lead magnet for my newsletter now. You can find that at themarcusgarrett.com/salary. I'll send it to you for free.
Okay.
So once again, that's actualized is, I read this from 2018 to 2020. I ranked those books and I would review write-ups on the blog. And it came from a challenge on the podcast. I wasn't really much of a reader before that. I used to read like fiction. I was into Stephen King and murder mysteries and stuff like that. And I mean, I still am. But I wasn't really like reading to develop and grow. And someone came on the podcast and she was like, if you read 10 pages, she did math, which is always an amazing concept to people. She's like, if you read 10 pages a day, you will finish the average 300-page book. And I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Then I pulled out my 10 key. I was like, she's right. That's 300 pages. And the average book is about 330.
Right.
And so I was like, I'm going to try this out. Like I got 10 minutes a day, let me carve 90 minutes out of that 4 hours I spend binging Netflix and read 10 minutes a day. Before I start Netflix, I'm going to read 10 minutes. I read 4 books in the next 2 months. And I was like, let me continue this challenge. I made the mistake of making the declaration on the show, so that it got exhausting about halfway through.
You know about public declarations.
Yeah, man. People were like, yo, Marcus, when you going to drop that next review? I'm like, man, don't reviews. So that being said, I had to fight my way through the next 60 because not every book is good, unfortunately.
Right.
But now those are all available. And it's actually been amazing because I have 4,000 subscribers on my community newsletter. And that's like one of my top lead magnets.
Wow.
So again, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Right. So, hey, let me say for people like, man, they probably at home like, I ain't about to read no book. Yeah, I definitely ain't going to read no money book. So I would say pick the book of your choice. What's focused. I was doing a personal finance podcast. So obviously that niche made sense to me. And if you are interested in money, if I recommended one book, it would be The Simple Path to Wealth. Having read 20, I would say The Simple Path to Wealth is the most straightforward read of those 20. My favorite, however, would be The Millionaire Next Door by Dr. Thomas Stanley, I believe it is. And like I said, you can find all those at themarcusgarrett.com/salary. The other one is a little bit difficult for people to actualize. It occurs more naturally to me than I realized. And it came to an aha moment. I've been doing it all my life and I get it from my father. Okay. It's systems of list. That's over here to the right. I have a little notepad for this interview right here. And I was doing an interview once and I mentioned, I was like, I got a calls to action list that I follow and I look at each week and I've been improving on it. Like I said, actualized systems. So I've been improving on it since probably my 20s. My dad he was a sticky notes guy. So he put sticky notes all over the house when he wanted me to do something. I walk in the bathroom, be like, clean the bathroom. I go to brush my teeth. It's like, don't forget the sink. I'm like, God, leave that. I go to the shower curtain. It's like, clean the shower. I'm like, Jesus, like, when did he even come in here and put all these sticky notes? So I've been able to actualize his sticky note system. I use Trello now for my sticky notes. And, if you're not using, that seems very simple. People are like, sticky note system, calls to action. But I would challenge those same people to think about how many to-do items fell apart for you this week alone.
Right.
And if most people are being honest with themselves, it's easily 10. It's easily 10. It's probably closer to 100. And then what I do now, and I actually stole this from somebody, is I do...
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Why We Succeed. If you value relationships and believe they are the true key to success, be sure to subscribe. To watch this full discussion and gain access to exclusive content, join our Patreon today. The link is in the description. Thank you, and we'll catch you on the next episode.